Hey guys, and welcome back to the Makers podcast with your host Brandon Burns and Todd Pedler. Todd, how are you?
I'm good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. I'm excited for today's guest because this is our first international guest, and they're coming to us live from LA, the home of entertainment, Hollywood, but also like entrepreneurs and successful people. So I'm excited for today's guest. She's going to be amazing. For those listening and watching, we're up to about episode 3 of our new show. We're so pumped to be on this journey now. It is for the makers, the creators, and the barrier breakers. So we're going to feature you people that make cool stuff. We're going to feature people that do cool stuff, and more importantly, people that do it on a global stage, so that you, sitting at home as an Australian entrepreneur, can have a reference structure and a vision for seeing how you could perhaps follow in their footsteps. So today's guest is a career and leadership coach. She's an entertainment lawyer. She's a speaker and group facilitator. She is the creator of the Dream Career Accelerator Program for Gen Z and Millennials. From Coaching with Madeline, it is Madeline Miller. How are you?
Very well, thank you. That was a really good introduction.
It was it? Oh, wow. If you're watching on YouTube, which I know a lot of you will be, you'll see that Madeline is she is on brand today. You go to her website, you go to her LinkedIn, and you see her here. It's just, we're rocking the pink. I'm assuming this is like the brand, yeah?
There's 3. There's the pink, the purple, and this sort of yellow accent. So I try and stay in the pink and purples.
I love it. That's unreal. And we were just talking off air. You guys have got to follow her on LinkedIn. You've got to follow her because we were just discussing, I think, one of your videos, Madeline. How many views has it had in the last 48 hours?
Oh, yes. The one that's gone crazy has got, I mean, I haven't checked actually in the last 24 hours, but it had about 25 million views.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's crazy.
I know LinkedIn's just launched their new video feature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I made it.
And now to translate that into clients. That's the holy grail.
Exactly. It's the conversion. That's the ROI. I mean, a couple of them I was saying to you guys earlier, like I've been posting them we've only been really doing the video stuff for a couple of months, but, it's just sort of like, you just post them, it feels like into the ether for a while, and then suddenly one takes off, and like now I have 27,000 followers, actual people following me. And this is all from like the success of like one. Now I think maybe 2 or 3 have gone viral, but now everything I post gets really high engagement. So it's just like the tide starts to shift and you see it. Like it's kind of crazy.
Madeline, just on that content piece, I want to ask you a question because a lot of entrepreneurs who listen and watch to this show know deep down that they have to build their profile and raise the awareness of their personal brand and profile. And you talked a little bit off air about the sheer amount of content you've committed to creating. How hard is it, probably not for you, but for other people just to get started? Because you sound like you've really got a wave of momentum now and you're in the rhythm of creating content and you're used to it. But I'm assuming it's still quite a big thing for people to cross starting doing who are a bit nervous and anxious about it as a leader.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like for me, because I wanted to reach this sort of quote unquote younger audience, I thought that I'd have to build my profile on Instagram and TikTok. And so obviously you have to create content. And so at first I thought I'd copy some of the other content creators out there who weren't necessarily in my space, but were more in that sort of, what would you call it, like service space, like, therapists or other types of coaches. And they do more like educational pieces to camera. So I started doing that. And, all my friends were like, oh, I love your stuff. But it didn't really grow my audience. And so I knew that, but I was spending money on it. Like I had a social media manager. She was helping with the clicks. I mean, I wasn't super happy with what she was doing, but I didn't really know what else could be done because I was so new to that part of the space. Obviously, I've had social media for a long time, but I didn't really know much about that part. And so I actually found, I can literally tell everyone my secret. I pay for it. Like I found a company, I would say company/young woman on Instagram who has her own business called Personal Brand Launch. You can look her up. Her business platform is to do this sort of content for people. And the process they do is I gave them all of my philosophy, my programs, my ideas, like my point of view, my unique selling value proposition, all of the things that made up my brand. And then they went and researched the types of videos that would go viral in my niche. So there's, certain formats that we're working. And then every month I committed to the basic package, which is 15 videos a month, which is a lot. And then every month they will go and the copywriters will look at my material. So they'll look at like what's working in the space, and then they'll take my material and they'll try and put the two together. So put my material in, a talking heads sort of thing, or like doing your makeup things. Like, some work better than others. They then come back and they say, okay, and then I edit them and I go through and I make sure they're sort of on brand and they're things I feel comfortable saying. And I tried to keep an open mind, because a lot of this I was like, a lot of my brand is not having short tactics, like understanding foundational skills and principles in order to have sustainable success. So, short videos of like, do this, say this. I was like, it's a little bit off brand. So we kind of had to keep, it was a bit of trial and error to finesse them so that I felt like they were hitting the right target audience in the right way, but still felt like good and authentic for what I wanted to say. So then they will come back and like we'll work out those scripts, and then I get a week and I have to film them all. So yeah, it's really stressful. It's really stressful. It's stressful when the easiest one to film, like the talking back and forward, like that's easy because I can just have a stationary camera and I know now I position myself like this, I position myself like that, and then they edit it in. The hardest ones are where they want you to be doing different things and saying one line, because you constantly got to be moving the camera, setting it up, catching the light. As Todd will know, because we did film school together, I am not a director and I am not a DOP. So all of that stuff I found so excruciatingly painful. Like I have to work out sound. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so that's what we do. And so that's the plan. That's the program I paid them for. So, I guess short answer, if anyone out there wants to do this, that is how I did it. And it's been 2 months. Yeah. And it's just starting to build momentum now, which I think is quite a good time frame. If it had been going
I
on
think
6
that's
months,
remarkable.
I'd be like, what's happening? But
I think that's fantastic. I think knowing others who are doing the same thing as you, your trajectory to where you are today is fantastic. I think you've got immediate traction, and I think that comes down to, I think for me, watching you, the authenticity and so obviously the intelligence you bring to what you're promoting and talking about. I think, it commands attention. So I think well done on that front. And look, you speak about, you just mentioned you and I have a past life at film school at the VCA here in Melbourne. And back then I knew you as a lawyer working for Screen Australia, and, it'd be great for our audience to hear your path to where you are today, where it started, who you've got the chance to work with being a lawyer, and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I was the lawyer in Australia. I wasn't really sure, if it was the right thing, but it was sort of giving me a sense of quote unquote purpose. More on that later. But within the first few years of becoming a lawyer, I jumped around a lot. So, this kind of sense of identity that I hoped it would bestow upon me was a little bit lost, because I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But I'd always really been interested in entertainment. I'd done a little bit of different stuff here and there. And I think a few years, I can't remember, a couple of years into being a lawyer, I was like, okay, I really want to become an entertainment lawyer, but there's not a lot of entertainment law in Australia. I mean, you can set up your own firm. We don't have, now it's a bit different, but, do we have a Netflix office in Australia? Yeah, we must. Netflix, Amazon, studios. I don't know. Back then we didn't have any of that. So there weren't a lot of in-house roles really. And so I did, but I managed to get a job at Screen Australia. And one of the things I did to sort of support that was to go to the VCA for the night film school to really understand more about the industry. So then after doing that for a couple of years, I realized that, there's a lot of good lawyers who want to do this in Australia, and there's not that much work. And so I just decided that I really wanted to go big. And I had always wanted to go to the US to do a master's, but I just thought it was out of reach financially. And honestly, it was an enormous investment. It's not like I had a big amount of capital, but when you want to do something, you'll find a way. And that's what I've discovered. I think a lot of these obstacles, they might be real obstacles, but we kind of create them to find a way not to do something. So I found a way. I mean, I got a scholarship, I borrowed money, blah, blah, blah. And I moved myself to UCLA, so it's the University of California in Los Angeles, and I did the master's in law, but I specialized in entertainment law. And from then I wanted to do it that way too, because from then on you get a year to work without having to worry about getting a visa. So I had that year working sort of opportunity, and I again managed to, after a lot of networking, like pounding the pavement, get a job in a production company in West Hollywood. And so I did that for a couple of years and worked on a lot of movies. I did a lot of the financing work, the development work. I mean, maybe that's a bit bespoke, but anyway, I did a lot of the kind of pre-production work, and then we went into production on quite a few projects really quickly. So it was like an incredibly hard place to work. I did learn a lot, but it definitely wasn't the most, like, it wasn't the healthiest working environment. I wouldn't say there was great leadership. I didn't really feel like I had a mentor. I met some great people, but it was really hard. And then that company became a bigger company. And then I was sort of thrust in a new role, and I got promoted because I really pushed to get promoted to Vice President of Business Affairs. And that was more responsible for negotiating deals. So that was actually pretty cool, because then I was really starting to understand, like, okay, like, you know, the very unique language of the entertainment industry on the business side, like points, back ends, you know, all of this stuff that you're doing to construct deals for actors, directors, whatever. Then I sensed that was not going so well, the company, and I had worked with the producers of the James Bond franchise on a different movie. We'd been co-producers together, and I developed good relationships with them and the general counsel, general manager there. And so I positioned myself. I said, look, I know that you're going into production on a new Bond. If I came to London and you didn't have to have any further commitment to me after the production was over, what do you think about me coming over to be the lawyer? You know, and he was like, that's a great idea, but I've got someone in mind. And I was like, okay, I'll just circle back. And so I did. And he was like, well, they can't do it, but I've actually got another person in mind. I said, that's okay, just let me know how that goes. And then, like, actually they can't do it. All right, so it looks like I might be the option. And then he said, well, you know, they're worried about, like, the relationship. Anyway, there's a lot of obstacles I had to push through, but I tell all this detail because when I finally did get it and I left that company and we had my farewell. 2 days later, they announced that they were insolvent. So I skated out just at the right time.
Perfect timing, Madeline.
Yeah, if I'd lost that, really, like, I was on the money. Like, I just knew somehow. Because if I'd lost that job, I would have lost my visa. I would have lost everything. So I got out. So I became the production attorney for the James Bond franchise. Wow.
And that took you you went to Jamaica, right? There was a shoot in Jamaica you were at? Or?
Yeah, I went. That's right. So, yeah, I mean, some of the cooler things I did, you know, it sounds like glamorous, and, like, of course to some extent is, but a lot of it's just sitting in an office out in Pinewood Studios in winter. Like, you know, it's not that glamorous. So, but there was certain things that I did, like, I got to go. We were negotiating with a large French shipping company, so I was flown to Marseille to negotiate this deal a lot, which was so random. And then I also went to, where else did I go? I went to Marseille. And then I went to Jamaica because that's where we were filming this particular action shot, and they just wanted me there in case, I don't know, something went wrong contractually or just to make sure it was all going to plan. So I did go to Jamaica for several days, and then I came back to LA. I wanted to come back to LA because I actually was in London for 9 months and the production had been pushed. I don't know if you remember, but the director had quit just before I went. Originally it was going to be Danny Boyle, and then I don't know if he quit, but anyway, he was no longer on the project. And so they got a new director in. So that had pushed the production out a bit. So
just for the audience, we're talking about the No Time to Die production, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No Time to Die. Yeah, 2018. Yep. Yeah, No Time to Die. Oh, yeah, I came back to LA, but I came back to LA right as they moved the entire production to Italy. So I guess I missed out on being in Italy, but whatever. That was a good experience. And then actually I ended up working for them for quite a long time back in LA. So it turned out to be a really good decision.
What was it actually like working with Daniel Craig? Everyone wants to know, you know, like what was Daniel Craig like?
Full candor, I don't really work with him. Like I saw him. I was in the same building, like walked past each other, but I didn't like work directly with him because he doesn't really need to work with the production attorney. I was on set when he was on set, like with certain things. I didn't even negotiate the deal because that's a deal from before. So, like, yeah, my interactions with him directly, you know, I got to be honest, like they weren't. But he was there. Like we crossed in the. I walked past him in the hallway, and I don't know if I should say this publicly. I thought he was an extra. Like he was just in his, I think he'd been training, and now I'm like, oh, I think that's Daniel Craig. Yeah, just like hanging out in the hall talking. That was funny.
Brilliant.
Great.
Brilliant. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you there is you've obviously got the legal background and you're able to do that in the entertainment space in Australia. Did having that background of law as such play a part in making it easier to traverse over to the US? Or would you put that more down to the tenacity and the attitude that you just talked us through, being what was able to take you there and get those opportunities?
Yeah, good question. I think I used what I had. And so what I had was that I was a lawyer. So I, pursued a master's of law. Like I created this sort of narrative, right? This sort of through line that made me look focused and ambitious and purposeful. But I would have, you could use anything. I don't necessarily, I think being a lawyer certainly gives you some, I guess, I don't know, gravitas, but only within lawyers. Like, if you don't want to go over and be a lawyer, like it doesn't really matter that you're a lawyer. So I think it gave me like, I looked good on paper, like, oh, she's done this, and that's what she wants to do. This is her like vision. So I think in that way I could sell myself, as this person that wanted to be this entertainment lawyer and made it happen. But really you could take anything you were, you had, and you could maximize that. So I don't know if being a lawyer per se helped. I think that's just the thing I had.
So Todd, I was just going to say, we ask every guest this question, Madeline, and it's particularly interesting to hear from someone who's got a legal and a law background, right? Becoming an entrepreneur, or maybe it was something that was from birth. But in your opinion, both talking about yourself, but then also your opinion on the matter, do you think entrepreneurs are born, or do you think they're made? And love to hear about how you've evolved as one as well.
Oh, I've never thought about that. I'm going to say that I think they're born, but I think you can make it's work, right? I would never say like you're born and therefore it's like you've got it, because I work every single day at approaching my life differently than I did before. But I do think it's always been in me, this entrepreneurial drive to create, innovate, not necessarily be an employee. And I think I struggle with that a lot, but also like being an employee was necessary. Like I need to learn certain skills. So I think some people have it, because I don't think everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's great, right? Because the world needs all sorts of people. But I think if you've got that sort of passion or that drive, or that, it's not even just a passion, it's more like this unease that won't go away, like this sort of like this itch that you're like, I'm not doing what I should be doing, or this doesn't quite feel right, or I'm not living, if you've got that, I'd say you've just got that in you. But to become an entrepreneur is like work. You've got to make yourself become an entrepreneur, because a lot of people might have that and not do anything about it.
So what brings us to where you are today? And we'll get into what the kernel of the business is now. What was the impetus to bring you to this point? Was it the previous work environments you were working, you established or identified there's a real disconnect or a disharmony between a younger generation and a generation, I'd say our age or even older? What was the kernel that brought you to doing the business today?
I think a through line in my career had been this sense of frustration. And I think some of it was like I just described, this frustration that I wasn't living out whatever my purpose was and the best of my skills and abilities, and this sort of fear that I was never going to do what I truly wanted to do. I also think there was this fear of like what other people would think, or can I do it? Am I good enough? So that kept me on a particular path until that path, me being like as the lawyer, and until that path just felt really inauthentic. And I always use this example, like if I went to a party and someone said, what do you do? Or I met someone that, what do you do? I didn't like to say what I did, because not because I'm ashamed or anything, but it didn't feel like it captured who I was. And I think if you sit too long with that disconnect, like that internal disconnect, I think it can be really damaging. And I think, there's a lot of work now talking about misalignment burnout. So people who haven't found their purpose or are not feeling like they're living their purpose are actually increasingly prone to burnout. And I was definitely burnt out, right? Like I was worked to the bone. So I think there was this internal sense that this isn't quite right and I need to be doing more. And so I had to do a lot of work on what does that look like? Like, what are your values? What are your skills? What really lights you up? And I know that I love to communicate. I know that I like to be of service. I know that I want to be able to like take concepts and communicate them to people in a way that they can then use. So that, you know, and that to me, that just has always been what I've done. Like, people would come up to me in the workplace and ask me what they should do about this situation, how they should manage this conversation. So like, I kind of was also that person. Doesn't mean I was amazingly good at it. I think I just gravitated towards it. So I did a lot of work to become skillful and better at it. So that's sort of 50, maybe 60, 70%. And I think the remaining percent is that I was angry that I had never had a good workplace and leadership. And I really think that I saw how unhappy work made people and how much abuse and toxicity and bad behavior is permitted in the workplace in ways that we wouldn't permit it outside of the workplace. And I just felt like we are not taught to work well. We're taught more and more like how to have good marriages, friendships, work with your family. All of that seems like where we talk a lot more about interpersonal stuff. But in the workplace, it just seemed like this organizational culture was its own sort of set of rules, and I just didn't think that was fair. And so I think it was like, yeah, really getting some of my frustration, you know, and sadness, I think, for myself.
Wow. I mean, I think you've touched on a lot there. I think we could unpack a lot of that just in its own episode. But no, look, as a business owner, I'm being guilty of being a bad boss at many times. And I think listening to that and reflecting on that, and I think there's no perfect rule book or playbook to follow. And I think the bigger you are, obviously, the more complicated it gets. And, you know, knowing and understanding there are businesses where people, the leadership team, never get to meet most of the staff who work in the business, the larger you are. And I think, you know, that adds or underpins that disconnect that is, I think, at the center of what you're describing. So tell us about, you know, Coaching with Madeline. How long has it been running? And, you know, who is the target market and how are you reaching them?
Yeah, so I started coaching a couple of years ago while I was still consulting for Bond and a couple of other companies in it. I have my own entertainment company. I was doing a little bit of that work, but I really felt like I wanted to do more. And somebody I knew had been doing executive coaching, a friend of mine, and she said, look, I've got this client, I can't take them on. She and I talked about this stuff a lot. So she's like, I think you could probably coach him. And he was at Google. And I was like, okay. So I started like working with him. And as I began the work, I was like, oh yeah, this feels good. Like this allows me to think about the stuff that I really like to think about and communicate and work with people and help them become more self-aware so they can become better leaders. Because it's not really about me. I'm just like the guide, right? Like, what can I impart? What can I get them to see? You know, what can I provide for them so they have the safe space to talk about things? So I really enjoyed that. And so I was doing that I had a handful of clients for a couple of years. And then last year I decided that I really wanted to turn it into like a full-time business. It's taken, you know, as these things do, like longer than I expected. And, you know, I didn't know anything about anything. Like, I thought I knew about business, but I didn't know anything about websites and, you know, even marketing, and definitely know enough about social media. So, you know, people would come and ask these questions and they'd say, if you've got SEO, I said, I don't know what SEO is. Like, I don't know what anything is. So all of the learning curve, and I was trying to do too much too quickly. You know, it took a lot longer. So I think I fully launched, like, in terms of like my website and my social in February this year. But even then it's gone through all these sort of incarnations, and now I'm really starting to hit my like groove with it. So obviously I've got my content coming out, which is just meant to be informative and helpful. You know, there's no big sales pitch in or anything, but that's only part of building out a platform, right? Like, you know, they say you do educational posts, but you've also got to start doing stuff that's your unique point of view, so people know what you stand for. So I'm trying to do more work around that. And what I do now is I coach individuals one-on-one. They tend to be between like maybe 30 and 40. That tends to be the sweet spot, which I would call like a millennial manager. So some of them are pretty senior, but they're sort of struggling or feeling stuck or looking to like scale their business or their job. So I coach one-on-one. And on top of that, I'm creating, because I said I wanted to support Gen Z, I'm creating a fully self-paced online program, which is sort of taking the principles of executive coaching and turning them into shorter, more sort of practical and applicable modules for people to do who may not have otherwise have access to an executive coach. So that's going to come in at a much lower price point and be online. I will still probably provide some access to me, but the goal is to really try and get that to scale so people can start thinking about these things earlier in their career, because I think that's what we need to look at. We need to look at preventative stuff rather than just working with the senior leaders and hoping that that will trickle down. So that's my kind of big platform. And then obviously on top of that, I'm building out my own speaking. I've spoken for the USDA on like working across intergenerational workforces. I'm going to do a bit more work. I'm trying to do a bit more work with entertainment companies here because I've got that background. I know a bit more about like their staff and those cultures. So I'm going to do more workshops. I do workshops on career and influence, you know, sort of group coaching formats and presentations at companies that a lot of staff can attend rather than just one-on-one coaching, which again doesn't impact the collective. So that's sort of my business model for now. I want to start my own podcast. I might come to you guys for advice, but probably not until the new year. I just want to get like a really clear niche. Like, what am I going to say that's different? So that's, yeah, at the moment, that's great. Yeah, like more content, more online programming, more media. That's
like you could do this for someone in Australia, in London. Yeah. This is a global business, yeah?
That's the goal. I mean, honestly, and there's so many things that it could evolve into, like a membership basis or something. Like, I really want to bring people together. And actually, the LinkedIn stuff has been amazing because people are contacting me from all over the world. I just signed a client in Germany. I've had somebody reach out from Singapore. I had another one from like Norway. Obviously, I have North America. I have got clients in Australia. So yeah, the goal. I went to Asia actually earlier in the year and worked with some younger employees in Jakarta, KL. I want to go to India. So like, yeah, there is no reason this has to be capped territorially. It's sort of all inclusive. That's the goal.
Do you say there's an ideal customer profile for you, Madeline, or is it's pretty broad?
I mean, my ideal one-on-one client, because at some point I will cap the numbers of one-on-one clients because that's a lot of, it's a lot of my work,
your time,
and investment, and much more labor. Yeah, it's my time, but also like I want to give a good service. So like my ideal one-on-one client has probably got like, I would say like 5 to 10 years experience, has reached a kind of, certain level of success, but just is struggling with like how to go, like what the next step is. So maybe they want to become a director or partner somewhere, or maybe they just want to become part of the leadership or C-suite. And it might not be that they can't. They might have concerns about how they're going to do it and start a family, or like manage their work-life balance. Or they might be like, I just can't crack in and I need to know why, and I keep trying, like they didn't get a promotion, or everything that's been working up until now hasn't worked. So I'm really looking for people who are prepared to sort of look at it holistically, not just like, help me get this next promotion by telling me what to say. Like that might be part of what we do, but like I said before, I really want to go back to like the foundations and look at, okay, what are your blocks and why, and then what's our strategy to move through them. Yeah. And ideally, last thing I would say, if I could, my ideal client, one-on-one client, would also be curious about what it means to be a good leader. Like I work best with people who want to be good. Yeah, that's important.
Can I ask a self-indulgent question just because I'm very curious, because you're in the entertainment industry? Is that okay? So we all witnessed the downfall in some ways of the Ellen Show, a couple of years ago. And I know this is quite topical because it was in the entertainment space and it was driven by someone who at one point in time was incredibly popular, almost to the point where they were at the top of their game. Yeah. And then, you saw this unfold, this cultural or this problem that existed. And I know it's a unique environment, no doubt, the entertainment industry. But can you run us through, like, with respect to what you do as well, where it likely would have fallen apart and who would have played a role? Because everyone sort of associated the issue with Ellen herself. But in an environment like that, there'd be so many layers of management and leadership, and how could that have been improved or saved?
I can answer generally about what I've observed. So like in the entertainment world, it's a little bit like a feudal system, right? Like you have the king or queen at the top, and then you have everybody else that supports that. More so, like you definitely have that in companies, like with CEOs, but a lot of companies strive to not have that sort of closed, like there's always a hierarchy, but companies can try and be, more open, or, like they can have systems and policies in place. My experience, again, and I haven't worked everywhere. I haven't worked, for example, with a big studio, so I'm talking more for like that mid-sized company. But my experience is that they kind of their laws unto themselves. Like they're not really companies that are like interested in being a good company for people to work at. They're interested in making product and content that does well, right? And so then you factor in big egos, lots of money, the outward face of celebrity, which is a whole world unto itself. And there's just an enormous amount of unchecked power, more so than I would say, at a normal, even a Fortune 500, right? Like there's the celebrity aspect really adds something to it. And I think there's a lot of fear built around these kind of celebrities, a lot of sort of untouchability. And the culture has created that. Like I don't necessarily, it's not innate. Like it's not like it's just what we've allowed to persist and therefore has become the norm. I do think it's changing a little bit. Money and power talk. So in that situation, I don't know. But of course, if there's a culture of fear, and particularly in the US, people's jobs aren't secure. So, the labor laws are different. You can fire people without cause. So I think if you're walking around feeling more like you can be fired at will, like it's a very different, culture that's created. Again, I don't know enough about the specific Ellen sort of environment, but I would say that it was just permitted until it just got untenable. And there would be a lot of people that probably saw a lot of things that made them uncomfortable, let a lot of things through that made them uncomfortable, but felt they needed to because that's just the way it is. And I guess part of my coaching is sort of like, can we question that? Like, is that just the way it needs to be? Like, that's sort of where I feel quite passionate about, like systems change, right? Like we saw that with even Me Too or whatever, like power can change. Like, so there's a constant, like, we shouldn't just accept that things are the way they are. Like we have created all of it.
Yeah, love what you're doing. Talk me through the scenario where one of your clients would typically find themselves in, where they're really going to have a burning desire to want to find you and get your help. Like what's the typical scenario, if you could describe it to me, that they've recently been through that's just not broke them, but it's kind of made them go, you know what, I really want to be able to have a better experience for myself.
It's another good question, because it's rare that somebody comes when things are good. Like it's rare that somebody comes and goes, oh, I just want to be a better leader. Occasionally that happens, and that's like, I'm like, wow, okay, like the fact that you're just going to invest in your professional development just because, that's amazing, but that's rare. So usually, I mean, I've had so many people come through my social recently, and I always say, what brought you to me, what's happening, what's going on for you right now? And it's a variety of things. So overlooked for a promotion, big one. Feeling burnt out, but usually there's something like they were trying for something and they were promised something and it didn't happen. It doesn't always have to be a promotion, but or there was like a reorg. So they've been working their ass off, and then there was a reorg, and suddenly they're like, I'm not managing people anymore. I feel like I'm being demoted. So there's this real sense of injustice. Like, I've been working so hard. Why is my company treating me that way? So that's a big one. Women will often come because they just feel that they're not getting the respect they feel they should get, and they don't know how to have that executive presence. They feel they're treated unfairly. That happens a lot. A lot of the time people have got feedback. So two things, they've had a performance review and they've been told they're just not performing and they don't quite know how to fix it, or they have got feedback on their communication and they're like, well, I thought I'm doing this, but I got feedback that I was, sometimes women come to me, I got feedback that I was aggressive and I don't know why, I don't know what that means, so that kind of, that they tend to be the normal kind of, buckets of problems that have just happened. But usually there's some sort of crisis. Or occasionally people will come and they're like, actually, this is not occasional. This is quite common too. This is another bucket. This is like people who have done quite well, are probably doing quite well, but they're like, I just don't know if this is what I really want to be doing. And that makes me anxious because this is all I've ever done. And, you know, what will it be like if I change careers? What could I do? Or I know what I want to do, but I'm too scared to do it. So that's another, like, I had a new inquiry the other day from a guy like that. Like, nothing's actually wrong at work. He's just like, I don't know, I'm kind of at a crossroads. They often say I'm at a crossroads. You know, I want to make sure I'm reaching my full potential. Like, I get that a lot.
Yeah, I love this.
Yep.
Over to you, Todd.
No, how do people find you, Madeline?
Well, at the moment, they're finding me through LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, Madeline Miller Coaching, but I have my website, coachingwithmadeline.com, and that has an inquiry form. I'm also on social media. And on Instagram, I couldn't get Coaching with Madeline because somebody else had it. So it's actually Madeline Miller Coaching, which is very annoying for branding. But yeah, so Madeline Miller Coaching on Instagram, Madeline Miller website. I'm also on YouTube. It's the same stuff. But mainly, yeah, through my website and LinkedIn. That's how people have been finding me.
Unreal.
Awesome.
Unreal. Well, thanks for joining us all the way from LA and sharing with us your Aussie accent, which is still as thick as ever.
I'm talking to you two, though. I adapt. Yeah, it does sound good.
We're going to put links to Madeline and her course and everything in the show notes. And learning about you on this call and what you do really does move the needle for people that are in those scenarios where it sounds like you really started a business based off of the back of the experience you had and wanting more for yourself and the next person who comes that will be in the seat. And that's just so refreshing to hear because not only you're solving a problem that exists, but you're also basing it upon a lived experience. And I just know in my heart that's going to resonate. I can tell.
Thank you. That is like the best feedback ever. Like, yeah, that's really... I'm like, I love hearing that. Thank you. It means I'm like on the right path.
Madeline Miller, Todd Pedler, anything else to add before we wrap up the Makers Pod?
No, thanks, Madeline, for coming on
I'm good.
on the Makers podcast. Thanks again.